Lots Geekouts. Today's topic is about network installs. So I worked at the internet service provider for 5 years in technical support, and I've had to help on numerous thousands and thousands of installs with customers calling on the phone or text calling on the phone. So this is our coffee time and topic of the day, and the topic of today is network installs in homes, in residential homes and commercial homes or buildings. But I would have to say the number one thing that I see is when techs go on installs in the systems I have worked with, typically the modems or fiber units need to be authenticated in our systems. And also, when they go and do the install, if it's not our own home Wi-Fi system in our units that we have, where I used to work at a company, I'm not going to say what, but at the company I worked for, then they would have to authenticate the customer's router. The reason being for the authentication, one second. It's a little early. But the reason for the authentication is to make sure their router isn't cross-talking and that it will be talking back to the modem and then actually have the modem doing the routing, that it's in a bridge system where the network from the modem is going through the modem and the router's in routed mode, so it's not bridging back and having the modem talk to it. So that was probably the most prevalent thing, was when we do that, the whole point of the authentication is to actually make sure that router is in a routed mode. But when you're doing the install, I think it's very important to have the router centrally located. The reason being, if it's centrally located in the home, you're going to have less issues of range issues from the router. Since it's in the center of the home, it's hitting all the right areas of the home, unless you go to a mesh system. But when you're doing the install, some customers, they want to have direct access to mitigate any issues from their devices. So especially when you're dealing with like big TVs, this is a cause for concern, because if the device is very far away, you have to have you have to make sure that that TV is getting the right signal strength, because if it isn't, if it's like medium strength, you're going to see cutting in and out. So you're going to need to have good signal or great signal from that TV. So what a lot of customers do is when they're doing that install is that they want to have a direct connection. That way there's no interference, there's no Wi-Fi signal issues, it's just a direct connection to the equipment. Now this can get a little complicated. The first thing that you have to make sure is everything's wired right into your wall jacks. If you're going to the wall, typically on your router you have 4 ports. So if you're going through the router, or are you be going through 4 ports, those ports will either go to, if you need more than that, you would go to an unmanaged switch, I would recommend, because if it's a managed switch, then you don't have to change any of the ports or anything like that. But if it's a managed switch, then you have to configure everything. So I always would go to an unmanaged switch if you can. But once you do that, then you'll be able to spread out and have a lot more ports. And that's really handy when you have multiple devices that you need direct connect, such as security systems. It may be multiple HD TVs. You might have to connect, smart devices that need a wired connection for the sustainability, so you don't have Wi-Fi interference or it going up and down and, having issues. But I would say the most prevalent thing when doing these installs is just knowing how things are configured, how the setup is. So if you're checking, we talked about yesterday about speed test and how if you have your device needs to be newer, because that can affect the data rate and what it's doing on the network and stuff. So when you're doing installs, you just got to be really careful of hey, is this line hot? Hey, is this line going to my unmanaged switch? Hey, how is this connected, to my modem or router? Is it plugged in right? You want to make sure you're using your LAN ports, those kinds of things. So that was basically all we had for today. So we're gonna get into the Q&A part of it. If you guys have any questions about it, or if you have any concerns about maybe your setup at home, this would be a great time to ask any questions. Oh, I will say though, when you're doing the install, like if there's a fiber install, those fiber lines, they're like super delicate. They're not like Ethernet cords. You can't whack them around. If you pinch that fiber line, it's gonna break it basically because there's a laser running through it. And if that happens, if you break that fiber line, then a tech has to come out. They have special equipment and they have to repair that. And then typically you're at the cost. But when you have if it's like an Ethernet cord or let's say coax, they're not as fragile. Or if it's like a DSL connection, they're not as fragile either. But if you're on fiber, you got to be really specific. And a lot of the times, like when I got calls for customers, there was just too much voltage or their fiber would go down. Like they would just have like too much voltage coming in and it would cause a surge and their fiber unit would go off and they would have to, flip their breaker and whatever room that is. And we had to identify over the phone, like, hey, I see this fiber unit down. Like, what do we need to do to fix things here? Or the flip side of that is if we had like a big storm and they didn't know that their breaker even went off, but their internet was down, then I had to have them go check, what's going on with that because obviously their fiber unit's down and their internet's down. So, but the electricity up, so that was great. At least they had electricity after the storm. So, good stuff. But yeah, you guys have any questions about internal networking for installs, or if you have any questions of how it works or what you have to look for, what are some common things that happen for our Q&A time. All right. Well, then I'm going to wrap it up today. We're not going to do the workout or music today. I have some other pressing stuff I got to do, but thank you for joining our live with Plots Technology, learning for our geek outs today. And you guys have